Will Lamar Jackson rush over 20 times again? And who do you play on a slate without Saints, Chiefs, or Rams? This is the Football Guys Daily Fantasy Power Grid. I'm Austin Lee. I'm joined by John Lee, Ryan Hester, and Devin Knotts. During the next hour, we're going to get you ready for the Week 12 main slate on DraftKings and FanDuel. If you are looking for the Thanksgiving slate, please check out our special bonus episode where we cover just those 3 games. On this episode, we're going to talk about the Sunday main slate games. Let's start off with some Vegas analysis here, John. What is Vegas telling you with those lines and spreads this week?
A lot of home favorites this week, which is, it's typically a good thing for running backs. You get those home favorites and I think last week we had a lot kind of in the middle. This week we're kind of going the opposite way. Indianapolis, of all teams, topping the bill this week on the main slate, 30.3 implied team points against the Miami Dolphins. Looking good for Andrew Luck, T.Y. Hilton, maybe a little Marlon Mack. Tampa Bay at home with Jameis Winston coming in. They're just a point behind them. The game total there is 55 against the San Francisco 49ers. Who would have thought that a game with Jameis Winston and Nick Mullins at quarterback would have a 55-point total at the onset of this season? And it's kind of an interesting paradigm there. We'll certainly get to talk about that today. The Los Angeles Chargers, just a notch below it. Melvin Gordon looks like a lock this week. They're 12-point home favorites. Everything points towards him. And then in terms of away favorites, we do have New England dropping down a notch against the Jets, coming off of a disappointing loss to the Tennessee Titans. They're 10-point road favorites to the Jets. We'll talk about that as well. And then Baltimore, next one down, 10-point home favorites against the Oakland Raiders, making that cross-country trip. I don't know. There's a lot of interesting things this week. We got a lot of guys kind of near the top. We got a lot of guys near the bottom. We haven't liked defenses for a while. I think this week there are some defenses that you should like. It's an interesting week. It's different than what we've had over the past, let's call it 3 to 4 weeks. So a lot to talk about. I'm anxious to hear what the guys have to say. Let's get in.
Yeah, and those Patriots, after that loss, had the bye to think about that bitter loss, and so I think they're going to come out angry. But then again, the entire AFC East was on the bye last week.
They're going to try 110%.
Yeah, this time they're going to try 110%. That 100% last time, not so much. It's on. All right, Ryan, let's talk quarterbacks. Who stands out to you on the main slate here for QBs?
Yeah, it's weird because John alluded to it. That potential shootout, at least according to Vegas, the one in Tampa. It seems like the coaching staff would be kind of bananas to go back to Ryan Fitzpatrick again and continue the game of musical chairs. So even if there is a slight struggle from Jameis Winston in the beginning of that game, I still think he's going to get a full game's worth of action in a game where the total's 55. They're the favored team, and on a team that gains almost 80% of its yardage via the pass. So I'm looking at Jameis Winston right now as a cash game play, which feels a little funny, especially since I started the analysis by saying he probably won't get benched again. But other than Jameis Winston, I do like Lamar Jackson. We saw the floor provided by a running quarterback. I mean, rushing yards are worth 2.5 times as much as passing yards, and rushing touchdowns 1.5 times as much as passing touchdowns. And we saw the 100-yard 3-point bonus come into play in Lamar Jackson's first game. I think it's a game here against Oakland where opponents have been able to do whatever they want to do. I think Baltimore will probably work in some more passing with Jackson, which could offer even more upside on top of a floor that we've already seen with his legs. So he's another guy that I'm looking at. Probably more of a cash game play, actually. And then I do have one GPP play, and I might get called a homer for it, but I like Ben Roethlisberger. The guy had a bad game last week, and it was 300 yards and multiple touchdowns. So I think he's going to go a little bit overlooked, and maybe I'm wrong. We are early in the week, so the ownership roster, percent roster projections are not out yet. But I looked at it and didn't look at him right away, and it took me a couple times through to give him a peek. So those are the 3 guys that kind of stuck out. And I don't think we have to go really super cheap at quarterback this week, which we'll talk about. And you kind of teased, Austin, that we don't have to go too low everywhere.
Devin, what do you think at quarterback?
Yeah, Ryan mentioned a lot of them. So Lamar Jackson's my cash guy. I think he's too safe. I'm fine with Jameis, but I don't know. I think that starting with -2 points because he's going to throw 2 picks is not really something I like to do. But I think that Lamar Jackson's probably the guy for me this week just because they're going to have to continue to evolve him in this offense, especially if Joe Flacco's not coming back. Who knows at this point? I think that if they're winning, do they even bring Flacco back? Maybe not, but a couple other guys that I do like. So I'm going to go back to it as a GPP play, but this Cincinnati secondary is not good. So over their last, I don't know how many games this is, but 265-3 to Drew Brees, 472 yards and 3 touchdowns to Tampa, 358-4 to KC, 369.
You're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to do this.
369-1 to Pittsburgh. They did shut down Ryan Tannehill, 419-3 to Atlanta, 376-2 to Joe Flacco. Like, we've talked about it all year, but the Cincinnati defense or secondary is the worst in the NFL. Baker Mayfield at 5,500. I went with him the last time, and he did okay. So I think that it's a GPP upside play. The other guy that has upside, and we mentioned it at the top of the show, is Andrew Luck. So what is it, 6 straight games with 3 touchdowns or more? I don't know if he gets there this week because I love Marlon Mack, which we'll get to in a minute, but I do think that Indy is in a really good spot this week. I think 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, 2.5 touchdowns, let's call it. But that's a pretty good floor for Andrew Luck.
Yeah, it's scoring that half touchdown that's really difficult. John, who do you like at quarterback this week?
Sorry, I had to wet my whistle before I go off on Devin there.
What did I say that was wrong? I said nothing wrong.
Mayfield, you completely lied to our viewers about Mayfield. You never bring him up ever again.
Yep. Please shoot me if I ever tout Mayfield again. I believe were your words.
Keep playing the worst secondaries in football. What do you want me to do?
Guys, commenters, you should totally troll Devin for bringing up Mayfield.
One thing, he didn't mention him last week. He was on a bye.
For what it's worth, I kind of agree with the Mayfield call, but I'm not going to let you slide on it at the very least. There are a lot of good reasons. If you look over what this team has allowed Cincinnati last week, they didn't allow a passing touchdown, but they also allowed 117 yards on the ground to Lamar Jackson. Prior to that, it was 3 touchdowns to Drew Brees. Prior to that, the combination of Fitzpatrick and Winston was 3 touchdowns.
Were you not listening? I already ran through this.
No. But when you said it, I was so astounded that you were bringing it up. That it was I don't know.
They've allowed the most DraftKings points to quarterbacks on the year, and the other time I brought Mayfield up was Tampa Bay. I will only bring him up one more time, and that's when they play Cincinnati again.
We're going to hold you to that.
Atlanta, Tampa Bay, and Cincinnati.
What if he bombs this week? Will you do it? Let's get it off. He will. Okay.
The Cincinnati defense is just horrible, so go ahead.
All right. Cash game. I don't have a whole lot to add here. I don't think there's a whole lot to love. Jameis Winston versus San Francisco and Lamar Jackson against Oakland. Both of them are similarly priced. I think that they're both good cash game quarterbacks. On my GPP list, I've got Andrew Luck. I've got Mayfield. I don't know. I mean, I probably am crazy for thinking that even bringing this guy's name up. But Tampa Bay, can we go against Tampa Bay no matter what quarterback it is?
No. You can, but I don't think you have to. I think you're right to think about Nick Mullins, John, but I just on this slate you don't really need it. Yeah, I guess if you're GPP and you think no one else will, sure, but
I'd rather go Eli Manning.
Yeah, I think ownership. I don't know. I don't think ownership will be so concentrated that you have to go there.
If you're going to go there, do it on FanDuel, not DraftKings. He's more favorably priced on FanDuel.
All right, that's fair advice. I don't have anything to add beyond that, so I won't. So let's go on to the next position.
One more thing. I think that this Giants-Philly game shoots out. I think that it has the potential to go 35-30. I think that I think this is a Carson Wentz get right game.
All right.
Disagree.
I know he burned you last week. Sorry, John.
No, he did burn me last week. But NFC East, I'm a big fan of the NFC East. These games typically the second time around are much lower scoring than they are first time. First time they had 47 points. I suspect it'll be lower this time.
I guess my point was that there were a lot of people burned by Carson Wentz, so there's going to be a lot of people who don't want to go back there. So I think that I'll wait to see Steve's ownership, but when it comes out later this week. But if he's 5% or less owned, I'm intrigued.
Who Wentz
Yeah.
You're talking about? Yeah. Okay.
Let's talk about running backs. Ryan, tell me what you think about the running backs this week. I don't really have any big notes on running backs this week.
Yeah, it's just going to be really hard to not play Melvin Gordon in cash, and I don't really see any reason why you wouldn't. I mean, just given where the salaries are for the other guys, he's 500 cheaper than Saquon Barkley is, and he's in a game where he's a heavy favorite against a pretty bad Arizona team. And Barkley's on the road as an underdog against Philly. So Gordon is kind of where you want to start in cash. And then, we mentioned Marlon Mack, but if you really had to go cheap, another one that I don't mind here is actually Josh Adams in Philly. So he's 3,800 on DraftKings, which is really, really cheap for a guy.
I've never heard of that name in my life.
You haven't been. So you
I'm
haven't been
entirely
following.
joking because you guys criticized the heck out of me last week.
Oh, that was totally last week. This is
this
way
is-
different now.
Yeah, daily fantasy sports. I don't know what happened last week.
Scored a touchdown from 58 yards.
Yeah, no. He was talked up by his head coach 2 weeks ago, and then the game plan followed through on that, even in a script that wouldn't necessarily complement his skills, as you'd think he'd be a power back in a game that they were losing. So now they're a home favorite, which helps. And so, and at that cheap, it just seems like the touch volume should be there and can justify the price.
Just for the record, he touched the ball 10 times last week. If you're going to take
Scored a touchdown.
If you're going to take a victory lap on that, it's in poor taste.
3,300. All I said was if he scores a touchdown, he pays off his salary.
I'll have to
Yeah.
listen to the tape. I'm not so sure that that's what you said, but
I said he's going to get 10 to 12 touches. I did say that.
all right.
I'm pretty sure Devin's right. I'm pretty sure I remember that. Devin, who do you like this week?
Yeah, so two guys. So I do like Marlon Mack a lot. This Miami run defense is really horrible. The last time they played, 145 yards and 2 touchdowns to Aaron Jones. And then the game before that, 175 yards and a touchdown to Houston. And the game before that, 208 yards to Detroit. So they're on a downward trajectory. Raekwon McMillan and Kiko Alonso are really struggling at the linebacker position. I do like Nick Chubb. So if you don't like Mayfield, Cincinnati's allowed the 3rd most points to running backs on DraftKings scoring this year. Chubb is really the only guy that they got in that backfield. But I guess the question is, on FanDuel, are we just paying up for Gordon and Barkley? Because this Eagles defense, this Eagles run defense is also on a pretty downward trajectory over the last since week 8. So over the last 4 weeks, over their last 3 games, they've given up 116 yards and a touchdown on average, and then 5 for 57 and 0.7 touchdowns. So they've given up the fifth most PPR scoring points on the season or over the last 3 games. Do we just plug those 2 in on FanDuel? I mean, I'm tempted just to say yes.
I think you're going to have to find, salary relief elsewhere, which maybe we have plenty of. But what do you think about that, John?
It's an interesting question because Saquon Barkley tore that team up the last time they played. It was the only thing they could do right? I mean, I think he had 130 yards rushing and almost
99 receiving.
Yeah, almost 100 yards receiving. But if I'm the Eagles, I'm doing everything I can to prep to eliminate or at least minimize Saquon Barkley from doing it again. and making me beat them with somebody else. I don't know. I'll be honest and say I haven't looked at FanDuel pricing as extensively as I have with DK at this point, but it certainly is an interesting approach. For me, I've got one guy you guys haven't mentioned yet is on DraftKings, LaShawn McCoy at 4,200. What the heck happened? I mean, I know he's playing against Jacksonville, but the last time he was playing against anybody, he scored something ridiculous a few weeks ago, right?
I won 13-2.
I mean, and that was it. That was what?
It was the flukiest result in the NFL this year.
Why is that?
Because the Bills won by 1 million on the road.
Outside of the Bills winning, I thought you meant flukiest performance.
No, I meant the game. Actually, the Bills beating the Vikings was the flukiest result. The Bills beating the Jets by that many was the second flukiest.
But from a cash game perspective, I mean, I'm looking at his game logs here. I mean, they got blown out by Baltimore, Green Bay, and in those two games he didn't reach cash game value. But in any game they've kept it remotely close. The Chargers, the Titans, the Texans, the Jets. He's done quite okay. And even the Patriots he scored 15 points against. I think in cash games, he's a guy that I'll be saving salary with on DraftKings. I think Melvin Gordon is the guy you want to lock and load. Josh Adams, I do agree with Devin this week that he's a good play. In tournament formats, I agree with Chubb. I agree with Mack. I don't know that Mack is a cash game play. I think he's borderline. I'm not saying he's not. I just I wonder about that. In tournaments though, Joe Mixon against Cleveland, 6,800 on on DraftKings, and what do we think about what happened last week in Baltimore? Everybody's talking about Lamar Jackson, but let's talk about Gus Edwards for a second. This guy came out of nowhere. I was one of the guys who was high on Alex Collins last week. He scored an early touchdown. I thought that I had made a good call, and then Gus Edwards comes out of nowhere. And this week he plays Oakland. Oakland's got the, 25th DVOA rush defense. They're allowing, looking at Austin's normalized strength of schedule, I think it's 13% over league average. This is a good spot for him. I suspect he's got to continue to get this type of the type of action he got last week because he did not fail, and he's 4,400 on DraftKings. What do you guys think about him?
I think he's a fine GPP play. I think there's too much downside risk for him in cash.
Oh yeah, that's what I was talking about. GPP.
Yeah, he could have 5 carries and be pulled. So just be aware of that. I wouldn't go too highly. I wouldn't have a ton of him, but I think he's fine.
Yeah, it's a question worth asking though. Any double-digit home favorite, especially one that will be focused on the run. But yeah,
Frank Gore revenge game.
Say again, Frank Gore
revenge game going up against Indy. 3,600 on DraftKings.
He's going to bring 110%. He's going to bring 110% against his old team.
No, but there is a script, right? If they're on the goal line, they're going to try and force him in. But I mean, Frank Gore has been maybe the most underrated player this year.
This decade?
4.5 yards per carry this year. I mean, 90 yards on 13 carries against the Packers. He's not the plotter that he ran 101 yards against the Bears. At 3,600, throw him into a lineup. You could do worse, and if he scores a touchdown. He hasn't scored a touchdown all year, but it is a revenge game. Why not?
I like it. I'll admit it. I like it.
So he's due.
I mean, he has been outplaying, getting more work than Drake. So it's
a lot of people think of Frank Gore and they think of Jordan Howard, who gets like 3.2 yards a carry. That's not the case this year.
What scores price on FanDuel?
He is, I don't know. Keep talking. I'll bring it up. I'll interject.
I like him better over there.
5,600.
56.
At 56.
I tend to like him better over there because of the half point PPR, because he doesn't catch a lot of passes.
Yeah.
But I do like your sentiment. I also like the fact that I know he's touched the ball a lot. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but he's touched the ball a lot, and if he's not got into the end zone yet, there certainly is some positive touchdown regression happening there.
I just like the 3,600 price.
Yeah, I get
the player.
It.
Yeah, I mean, he's getting double-digit touches in each of the last 7 games.
And it's a revenge game.
And of course, there's the narrative street part, which is the big thing. Any other running back stuff before we move to our wide receivers? Nope. Awesome.
No.
Let's talk wide receivers. Really, the only injury I'm keeping my eye on is there's some talk that maybe AJ Green could come back this week, but it's pretty early in the week, so I don't know. Let's keep an eye on that a little bit. Other than that, I don't have any real big names on my list. John, we'll come to you first. What do you think, wide receivers?
Yeah, I'm going mid-range this week. It's an interesting week. I think you led off with that in terms of your intro. There's nobody I really want to spend up for in cash. So I'm looking at guys between 5 and 7K. And at the top of my list, Emmanuel Sanders. He's going up against Pittsburgh, 5,500, getting plenty of volume. Cortland Sutton, struggling a little bit on the other side. And, if Ryan's right and Ben Roethlisberger is able to put points on the board, this is a good situation for Sanders. He's a wide receiver 1 for 5,500. I think that says it all. T.Y. Hilton coming off of a big game last week. They really didn't raise his price a whole lot. He's 6,500. He's a guy I like for cash. Keenan Allen against Arizona. If you're going to pass the ball against Arizona, you want to pass to the slot receiver because they're going to avoid Patrick Peterson for the majority of the game. He's 7,100. He's a guy I liked. And then I'll end. So these are all cash game plays, but one guy I like, excuse me, with the GPP upside, but also cash game viable, Danny Amendola is 4,600 on DraftKings, and he's getting a lot of looks. And this week he'll go up against Kenny Moore there in Indianapolis, who's been dreadful in coverage this season out of the slot. I think all 4 of these guys are where you want to kind of mold your cash game lineups around. I'll leave the GPP picks to the other 2.
If you're considering that Amendola pick, just keep an eye on the Devontae Parker injury situation. He may or may not be going this week. Let's see, Devin, who do you like at wide receiver?
So, John, you don't like Odell?
I love Odell in GPPs, but in cash games, I think Saquon takes away some of his floor.
So where are you spending up this week besides Gordon?
Gordon's the guy, and I think it's fairly evenly distributed. I made a cash game lineup earlier tonight, and I don't think there was a guy above 7,100 outside of Gordon.
You're taking nobody below like 45 or 5,000.
It's very, very even this week, yes.
So I do like Odell Beckham quite a bit this week. I don't know what to think of this Eagles team. They seemingly are falling apart. And if you believe the theory that they're going to stop Barkley, we talked about a lot of the receivers our running backs that we liked. I think that Beckham is in a really good spot. I think that if they do sell out, they have the ability to sell out to try and contain him. They can't stop him, but Beckham should draw some one-on-one coverage for Beckham. I do like the Sanders call. Antonio Ryan has scored a touchdown in 6 straight games, 7 straight games, something like that.
7, yeah.
Yeah.
He's been – I don't know why people haven't been talking about him this year. I know the matchup's tough this week, but –
8 straight games, 9 of 10 on the year.
Yeah, like if you're going to pay up for a cash guy, maybe Antonio Brown is the guy that you would theoretically pay up for in cash just because he's been scoring almost every week. I like the Hilton call. Mike Evans is a nice GPP play, getting Jameis Winston back. We talked about the passing in this offense. Who else are they going to throw to? They could throw to Jackson or Godwin or Adam Humphries, and I do like Humphries now that he gets Winston back. Good call, John, on his target share a couple weeks back with Fitzpatrick versus Winston. So I do like Humphries as a cheap guy, but Evans is a nice GPP play because I don't think a lot of people will have him unless they're stacking him with Winston. So I actually like him without the stack. So because I'm not going to have any Winston this week.
All right, Ryan, who do you like at receiver?
I think these guys were reading off my notes. They mentioned every single I had like 5 or 6 written down. They've all been mentioned. So I guess we all are all set at wide receiver.
Don't play Jarvis Landry on FanDuel.
You know what? I was going to ask how you feel about Jarvis Landry in general, because he and David Njoku seem to be two guys that a lot of people are losing money on this year.
Yeah, I've been saying it for like the last 6 weeks. Don't play Jarvis Landry. People think that there's a floor there of 100 catches, and he may catch 85 balls this year, but he's averaging 10.5 yards per catch, and he has 2 touchdowns. So that's not really a good combination.
So you're playing a
Baker Mayfield to GPP value then?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think it is Njoku. I do like Njoku this week. I also like Duke Johnson as a GPP play if I have to go there. But Mayfield really spreads the ball around. So, in his last game, he had 11 receivers catch passes. So he's not throwing to one. Brashad Perryman caught as many balls as Jarvis Landry. So I think that he spreads the ball out enough that it's not necessarily going to be one guy unless you're taking a receiver and hoping for a touchdown, which I think in that case it would be Johnson or Njoku.
So you're saying play Brashad Perriman. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, I'm not telling you not to, but I'm not telling you. I have no feelings on Brashad Perriman.
Very coy, very coy. Yeah, that was just Ryan trying to get a UCF reference in. All right, let's talk tight ends. O.J. Howard is out this week against San Francisco, and we're keeping an eye on Rob Gronkowski to see whether he plays this week.
If he plays, his price is laughable on DraftKings.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100, like –
if he's healthy.
Yeah, I mean, but nobody's going to have him.
No, I disagree. I think if he's active, he's going to be highly owned at 5,100.
Okay.
I do. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen yet. We're recording so early this week. We don't have any evidence. And then, of course, the New England Patriots are impossible to read from an injury report perspective. But if he's 5,100 and active on Sunday, he's got to be 20% owned, which for the tight end position is super high.
Well, we know there's not going to be any positive reports coming out, right? So we're not going to know until 90 minutes before the game starts whether he's active or not. So I think some people will be scared off that he's active, but not really, officially active.
My opinion is going to be on Friday if he gets in a full practice, and that's my caveat. Full practice on Friday, 20% owned. Limited practice, I think your scenario comes into play.
All right, so Devin, who else besides Gronkowski do you like at tight end? Oh, you also mentioned Njoku.
I do like Njoku. But I don't love Njoku. I wouldn't play him in cash. I think for me, I'm either spending way up and going to George Kittle in cash, going up against this Tampa defense, who has allowed the second most fantasy points to opposing tight ends, and they can't stop anybody, which we've discussed pretty much all year. Or I'm going way down and going with Nick Vannett. The Carolina Panthers have allowed the most fantasy points to tight ends. So really going one of those two, and it just depends on if I play both Gordon and Barkley in cash or not. One more guy I'll throw out there. I don't know why his price is so cheap on DraftKings, and he had a down week last week, but it's Greg Olsen. I mean, going into he did score a touchdown last week, but he's getting. I mean, he's not old Greg Olsen. Like let's not think about that. But at 4,400, I think that there's a floor there of at least 8 to 10 points. Which, if you could get it, 8 to 10 from a 4,400 as a floor, if he scores a touchdown, it's obviously more than that. But I think that he's a guy that's a GPP viable play.
I think you could do better for $100 more.
Oh, who do you got then, Ryan? Jared
Cook. Every single wide receiver in Oakland is injured, and Baltimore, except for Seth Roberts. So don't forget about that. But Baltimore allows 28.5% of their pass yards to tight ends, which is the highest ratio in the NFL. It's a team with great corners. You're not going to beat them outside, and particularly not with Seth Roberts and Marcel Aitman? Is that the rookie from Oklahoma State, Devin? Who might be
yeah, I think so.
right?
There's a chance Jordy Nelson comes back for this game, but
I thought he retired.
yeah,
Exactly. So
after
you're right.
playing
Yeah.
for
So,
Oakland, he may reconsider that.
so perhaps they get Jordy back, but that doesn't quite change. I don't think Baltimore's corners are going to have a real issue covering Jordy Nelson. So if they do move the ball, which they're not projected to score very many points, and I don't love tying tight ends to low team totals, but Cook is a de facto wide receiver who can do work in parts of the field that Baltimore allows some yards.
Or you'll just see Derek Carr? David
Yes.
Carr?
Yeah. I'm the one who says David Carr.
Same
Yeah.
thing.
Derek Carr.
It's
Or
Derek
you'll
Carr.
see Derek Carr crying on the field for half the game.
They could both happen.
Yeah. Could be tears of joy.
Yeah.
John, who do you like at tight end?
So I'll preface this by saying I don't like anybody at tight end this week. I wish I didn't have to play tight end. I really my notes are limited. I'm going to ramble here a bit. Jared Cook, I pulled up to see what he's done over the past few weeks. And then when I did that, I got the DraftKings picture. I'm a Howard Stern fan. He looks like Beetlejuice from Howard Stern in the photo from DraftKings.
You are rambling.
I know. He does. He looks like Beetlejuice.
He does, though.
Give me a comment in the YouTube section. Let's talk about that. Oakland's got the lowest team total on the entire slate. If he doesn't get into the end zone at 4,500, I just think that's a bit of a risk. And speaking of risk, my cash game tight end as of today, Tuesday, is Chris Herndon in the New York with the Jets at 2,900. They don't have anybody else to throw it to. They're going up against New England, who I don't know. I'm not exactly scared of them. I think using Austin's normalized strength of schedule tool, they're allowing 34% more points to tight ends over the course of the season than any other than league adjusted defense. So 29%. I don't love any tight end this week outside of maybe the alternative, and I'm not sure it's been mentioned yet. With O.J. Howard going down, Cameron Brate at 3,600 is a guy who I don't hate, but this is a position that I just wish we could get rid of this week altogether because there's not a whole lot to love here. Jack Doyle, maybe in GPPs.
Love him in FanDuel Cash.
Say again?
I love him in FanDuel Cash at 5,500.
I would agree with that. That's an appropriate price point because Miami linebackers have not proven or demonstrated any ability to cover a tight end in coverage this season. So from that end, in FanDuel Cash, I think he's definitely worthwhile. On DraftKings at 4,100, GPP worthy, but I'm not so sure cash worthy. But it's a tough position this week, especially with some of these other games on Thanksgiving and bye weeks that we've mentioned. There just isn't a lot to love here outside of what we've already discussed.
Right, Evan Ingram has the
done
speed.
anything. He has great speed, but they're not using him.
No, I mean, he had a 54-yard catch last week, and if he would have scored a touchdown, I think it'd be granted, it was against Tampa Bay, and we talked about how bad Tampa Bay's defense is against tight ends. He has 11 catches in his last 3 games, so he was hurt for a lot of the year. If he's getting healthy, nobody's going to have him. It's a complete GPP dart that I don't know if I'm going there, but is there one more question? Any love going back to Zach Ertz against Alec Ogletree, who's horrible?
Yeah, I don't mind it. I mean, the matchup is great. If anyone who listens looks at our lineup optimizers, he pops up pretty much every time you click any button on there. So it is a good one. It is something that people might not want to do after last week. I'm surprised
He's got a good trend going on. He's got 100 yards receiving every other week, and so
there you go.
If you look at that, we just go on trends. This week he's due for 100 yards. So, coming off of last week, he'll probably be low owned, especially when you combine that with his price point. I just worry. We talked a little bit about this pre-show. I worry a little bit about what impact Golden Tate has on this offense and the types of routes and receptions that Zach Ertz has moving forward.
But if he's less than 10% owned, I think he has the highest upside of any.
Oh, for sure.
Any guy, and I think that he's he's a nice GPP play. I'm not doing it in cash, but like I said, George Kittle's also a nice GPP play. I'm probably spending down, going with at the moment Nick Vannett, which I'm not really that happy about, and Jack Doyle on FanDuel.
Nice. All right, let's talk about defenses. Devin, let's go to you first on defenses. You usually like some cheap defenses. Who do you got this week?
I mean, I'd love to play Jacksonville against – is Josh Allen playing? I think he is.
But they're $4,000 on.
I know they're 48 on FanDuel, so they're way too expensive. Two defenses. So I think my favorite defense, and Ryan's going to cringe, is the Denver Broncos at 3,300 at home in the altitude. We've talked about Roethlisberger's struggles on the road, and
not this year.
Cleveland Browns at 3,100 against Cincinnati. Hugh Jackson is basically designing the offensive game plan, which
he knows that defense.
I don't know if he does because yeah. So I think Greg Williams is going to fire up some blitzes trying to make some plays. So Greg Williams is the type of guy who holds grudges against certain people. So and who knows, he may put a bounty out on Andy Dalton.
Oh, no. Let's not talk about bounties.
Yeah, no.
Oh, dear. All right, so –
I mean, Greg Williams does it, and I love it. 15 yards, well worth it.
Yeah, he got in big trouble for that before. Who knows what's going on right now.
But
right.
At 3,100, if he puts out a bounty, I'm not saying who the backup is because I don't actually know, but I'm just saying that it could happen.
Ryan, who you got at defense?
So you said, Devin, I thought I heard you say Denver was 3,300 earlier. They are
on FanDuel.
Oh, okay. They're 2,300 on DraftKings. So I thought you were talking.
I was using FanDuel pricing in case I don't like the Browns at 28 on DraftKings. I do like them at 31 on FanDuel. Let me clarify that.
Fair. So what I was going to say was for 33 on DraftKings, you're forgetting the best option of the week in my mind, and that's the Ravens. I don't normally like going over 3,000 in cash because most weeks we just can't. But this week I feel like we can, and Baltimore seems like the right team to do that with. Oakland's giving up tons of sacks, tons of pressures, and again, double-digit underdog opportunities for passing, for sacks, for fumbles, for interceptions, potential defensive touchdowns.
Why not the Chargers at $100 more?
I also had the Chargers written down as well. It's similar defense, similar situation. So just kind of pick the matchup you like there. If you are going cheap, I don't mind the Eagles, 2,400 DraftKings. That's another heavy home favorite, which is kind of what we look for. And I don't mind the Bills against the Jags. Jacksonville has been a gift to opposing fantasy defenses, and I don't think anyone's really going to necessarily want to click on the Bills. So they're a good one, 2,700 DraftKings.
Nice. John, what do you got on defense?
Yeah, I think these guys, they hit a lot of the ones I liked. I think on the cheap end, you want to go with the Eagles. I think Eagles are cash game viable against Eli Manning and just the ineptitude of that offense in general. At the high end, I like both the Chargers and the Ravens for the reasons that have already been mentioned. In GPP, I think you can pay up to be contrarian this week. So the Jaguars against Buffalo, this probably resonates with Devin. He hates Buffalo's quarterback, says he's inaccurate.
That's an understatement.
You've got some pretty good cornerbacks in Jacksonville. Maybe they've been underperforming to this point, but if they're going to feast on anybody, it's probably this quarterback. So at $4,000, though, I think a lot of people are going to say, I don't want to spend the extra $600 when I can have the Chargers against Josh Rosen there in Arizona. And so I think the ownership will be lower, and that substantiates paying a bit of a premium to get that contrarian nature. And, oh, by the way, no team in the NFL allows more points to the team defense position than the Buffalo Bills, and it's about 30% over the next closest competitor. And then the Patriots against the Jets. I mean, Do I trust Todd Bowles with a week off, or do I trust Bill Belichick with a week off? The Patriots are 3,100 going up against a rookie quarterback and Sam Darnold. I don't know. I think that's a decent way to go in GPPs as well. So I think there's a lot of interesting ways to go this week, and I wouldn't be surprised if we're on a lot of the same players at the positional, at the skill positions, at team defense, though. That's an area where you can really differentiate in GPP. So don't be afraid to try to take a chance there, because I think that's a differentiation spot this week.
Can I tell you guys a story?
Story time with Uncle Devin.
Lamar Jackson ran, 27 times last week?
Yeah.
What if he gets hurt?
From running so much?
Yeah. You get RG3.
That's a question more than a story, for the record.
I'm telling you a narrative. So if he gets hurt, he's going to be a high-owned quarterback, so he knocks out a lot of people in the game. And now you have Oakland's defense against Robert Griffin III.
Wouldn't that have to happen pretty early in the game for that to really have any impact on you, though? I mean,
sure, but if you're in like a 100, 200, Steve Buzzard won $1 million with the Bills defense. Like,
but they were on the field the whole game, and we knew they would be.
That's true.
And they're actually a pretty good defense.
Yeah.
That's also true.
If Lamar Jackson gets hurt, Oakland's defense might be the better GPP call.
But, I mean, Lamar Jackson's going to get hurt if he runs 27 times a game. Not this week, but at some point it's not sustainable. It never has been in the NFL. We've seen time and time again. So at some point he's going to – I don't know if I can do it this week. I may throw one in like the $3 tournament just because, but why not?
This has been Story Time with Devin Knotts. Boo, 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 boo.
That was a fun story.
Let's go to stacks. Devin, you're on a roll, man. Let's just keep rolling with those stacks. Who are you stacking this week?
You know, I don't prepare for stacks.
Oh, that's right. John, stacks.
I've got a few. I mean, it's probably chalky, but Andrew Luck to T.Y. Hilton this week.
That is chalky.
Yeah, I just feel like, it's too cheap. That's the issue. Maybe on the lower end. Everybody's going to go with Lamar Jackson in cash games this week. Willie Snead's catching a lot of passes there. He's going to get into the end zone at some point. He's still super cheap. You can combine the two of them, I think, for about $10K on DraftKings. Still have 80% of your salary to spend elsewhere. I kind of like that stack. And then in line with, I think Devin alluded to it earlier, Jameis Winston has this affinity for Adam Humphries. And, by the way, Adam Humphries running out of the slot this week. San Francisco, they don't defend the slot receiver very, very well. And that's a pretty cheap stack as well that I think will go overlooked by a lot of people. So I gave you a chalk. I gave you two under-owned guys. And hopefully by this point in time, maybe Devin's had some chance to figure out what he's doing.
We'll go to Ryan next. Ryan, who are you stacking?
Good host.
It's only on the show sheet every week. So I talked about Mike Evans earlier. I like Winston to Evans, but I do agree that Devin made the point that Winston seems like a safer cash play, and he does spread the ball around quite a bit. We've mentioned a number of his targets here, so saying that that's a cash stack is probably a little strong, given that we don't know where every ball's going there. The other one I like is just a leverage stack. We talked about how we're not going to really start a cash lineup without Melvin Gordon. Well, what if we just put Phillip Rivers and Keenan Allen, and a lot of the points come from the Chargers passing game instead? If you really need Gordon, I suppose you could have him in there too. He's capable of catching a receiving touchdown, but that's just the kind of the Melvin Gordon leverage stack that I would go with this week.
I like that strategy. Devin, hey, first time we've come to you to talk about stacks. Yeah. What do you got?
Let's go Carson, Wentz, and Zach Ertz. So I just think that Wentz is going to be Wentz and Ertz both are going to be lower owned than they should at home against the Giants. It's really a must win for this Eagles team. And Wentz has shown upside of over 300 yards. So I think it's more of I think Ertz is in a great bounce back spot. Not a lot of people are going to want to pay up for him, but that's kind of where I'm leaning. I do like the Hilton Luck call. That's pretty much it. A lot of the quarterbacks I like are Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield, those types of quarterbacks who just don't have that one guy.
Yeah, you don't want to be going crazy stacking those guys, I don't think. All right, it's time for parting thoughts, words of wisdom, story time about your Thanksgivings. Ryan, what are your parting thoughts for this main slate?
Yeah, I get we kind of touched on all the players I wanted. So the other stack I'm really looking forward to this week is the dark meat turkey with the stuffing and the mashed potatoes. Just going full game stack during.
You should have done this on the Thanksgiving show.
Oh man, full getting the red. That's all right. We need people to listen to this show too. But staying in the mood of the thankful. I'm thankful for you guys. So thanks for allowing me to be on the show and be entertaining with you, even you, Devin. So. Happy Thanksgiving to all of our viewers and to you and yours, gentlemen.
I appreciate that, Ryan. We love having you on the show. John, parting thoughts.
All right, I have two parting thoughts. One is don't sleep on Cleveland-Cincinnati as a sleeper game to stack. You have the number 4 and number 6 respective paced offenses there. So if you want to load up on those guys, I think there's good reason to do it. And then the other thing,
but the Browns have the best DVOA defense. Pass defense.
No, they don't.
They did at one point this year.
Yeah, it's no longer the case. You're being contrarian when it's no longer valid.
Just avoid DVOA. That's my message.
All right.
What else you got, John?
Is this my parting thought, or is this your parting thought?
I don't play by the rules. Sorry.
All right. So that was my parting thought. And now what I'm being thankful for on the week of Thanksgiving is that it is now 11:34 p.m. and I'm still awake to actually close this out. And if we're not all putting up yellow black-eyed Joes for that, I don't know what it is. So yes, there we go.
Yeah, we have to finish before midnight. Otherwise, John turns into a gremlin or something. Devin, parting thoughts.
I don't really have anything. So hopefully everyone enjoys the weekend. Hopefully Ohio State beats Michigan. And we're talking about Harbaugh never beating Michigan. Harbaugh has never beaten Ohio State. So hopefully that trend continues.
Hey, last week when I talked about my college football team, all I got was eye rolls, but this one's okay.
You set a trend, buddy.
We tune him out, the rest of us.
Yeah.
People just skip when I start talking anyway, so it doesn't really matter. They just click on YouTube and just drag the bar a little bit further, so it doesn't really matter.
That's why I put those little indexes in the comments so they can just go to the next section.
Haters gonna hate. It's okay.
So we've got some new content on the site this week. We started doing, one game slate stuff we're going to be covering this week as well as going forward. Let us know what you think about that. And then we've got some special Thanksgiving Day slate content for GPPs if it's not, Thanksgiving yet and you're listening to this on a Wednesday. So check all that out over at footballguys.com. We'll be back next Friday with our Week 13 episode. Oh, and if you didn't get a chance to listen to our Thanksgiving slate episode, go check that out now. On behalf of John Lee, Devin Knotts, and Ryan Hester, I'm Austin Lee saying have a happy Thanksgiving and thanks for being a football guy. To check out our content at footballguys.com, click the button on Devin's face. To subscribe to our YouTube channel, be sure to click on the button on John's face. And if you'd like to see our latest video, click on the giant video in front of Ryan's face. Click any of those now. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.